Hey, good morning, friends. Today is Wednesday, April the 9th, 2025, and the time now is 7:47 a.m. So, friends, I want to talk briefly about China. I want to talk briefly about the ongoing economic or trade war or tariff war between China and the United States. I want to talk specifically about the fact that the Chinese have imposed, or, as many have been saying, the Chinese are also imposing a 34% tariff on the United States of their own. Now, my friends, if this is your first time watching my video, if this is your first time watching a video from this channel, The Echoing Voice, this is how the channel is set up. Every institution, every prominent institution in the world, in terms of economics, trade, infrastructure, finance, and so on, does have at least one playlist on this channel. However, every country in the world has at least two playlists on this channel. For example, one playlist is titled The Country's Name, and the other playlist is titled Domestic, the Country's Name. And this is how it works. The Country's Name playlist does feature videos, talks, programs, ideas that talk specifically or focus specifically on the country's position in its region, the country's position in international relations, its interaction with other countries and institutions in the world. Therefore, my friends, in this case, we are talking about China. The China playlist is going to feature videos, talks, programs, or ideas that focus on China's geopolitical position, China's interaction with countries and institutions in its region and around the world, China's diplomacy and its diplomatic activities. However, the domestic China playlist is going to feature videos, talks, programs, or ideas that focus specifically on the domestic affair, the domestic situation in China, whether we are talking about economics, trade, infrastructure, development, and so on. Therefore, the domestic China playlist will feature videos, talks, programs, or ideas about what is happening in China. In the future, I am going to be inviting prominent scholars in China and ordinary Chinese to share with us on this channel about what is happening in China. And this is the case for every country in the world as well. Now, friends, in terms of the trade war, the economic war, or the tariff war between China and the United States, as I said earlier, China is also imposing a 34% tariff of its own on the United States. What that says is that China is the only country that has the temerity to go toe-to-toe with the United States, or the only country that has the ability or the willingness and is fearless to go toe-to-toe with the United States. Now, China is said to be the world's factory. It is the world's largest producer in the world. Of course, China is heavily dependent on its trade with the rest of the world, its export with the rest of the world. So far, I believe that the majority of countries in the world, to them, China is their number one trading partner. It used to be the United States. The United States no longer is a manufacturing country. The United States is a service economy country. However, the United States is also a heavy consumer of goods and services and from places and countries and institutions all over the world. The United States eat and drink resources from people, countries, institutions all over the world. As much as Donald Trump is now saying, and I read a newspaper this morning, or an article this morning, in which the White House is stating that, or White House officials are saying that, the tariff that China is imposing, the 34% tariff, is basically a lose-lose for China. At least that's what they are saying. That the United States is not a manufacturing country and that China heavily dependent on its manufacturing and export. That China imposing 34% tariff is going to backfire and hurt China. At least that's what the Trump administration is saying. However, on the other hand, I do believe that because the United States is a strong consumer based country, people want and need things. People want to have things. People get things that they don't even need. However, friends, acquiring these things, getting these things at a much higher rate can be problematic for people all over the world, and in this case, for the United States especially. So, in this case, the United States is going to be hurt by this tariff war. Yes, the Trump and the Trumpers are basically happy because this is a short term victory for them, but in the long run, it is going to backfire. Now, as much as Donald Trump and his administration imposing tariff on China was intended to make the United States and Donald Trump look strong and dominant, it seems to be making the United States and Donald Trump look very weak and that they are in fear. So every time the United States does something such as what Trump is doing, basically expose the United States. For China, China imposing a 34% tariff on the United States basically says that China is the only country that is willing to attack back when the United States attack. Now, in terms of China, the United States today, as of today, April the 9th, is imposing an additional 50% tariff, totaling 104% tariff on China. This is nothing but tantrum, as I said earlier in one of my videos, because it seems to me, or it appears to me, to have some historical resemblance. For example, in the movie Schindler's List, Schindler's opposition, okay, the antagonist, Amon Goth, he has a Jewish maid, the young lady who he often abused. There is a scene in the movie when Schindler came to the house. In the wine cellar, he was talking with the maid. And the maid stated to Schindler that Amon Goth beat her because she threw away the bone. And he was ruthlessly beating her. But then she asked him, "Why are you beating me?" And he went ballistic, beating the heck out of her, and stated to her that, "I am beating you because you asked." What Donald Trump is doing, imposing 50% or 104% tariff on China, kind of resemble that scene in Schindler's List. The United States and the West, they do have the temerity to do things to countries and institutions. And friends, when the countries or institutions retaliate, they throw tantrum. Why are you retaliating? They did that to Russia when Russia invaded Ukraine. They slapped Russia with sanctions and did all kinds of things to Russia. When the Russians retaliated, they accused the Russia of this and that. This also resembles the slavery era in the United States when whites, okay, or we can also say the Jim Crow era as well in the United States, when slave masters, slave catchers, white people, or the American slave system in the United States went ballistic at black people for resisting oppression. Slave masters went ballistic when black people resist being beaten or overworked. America as a country, white people as a community went ballistic at black people for marching, for resisting oppression. This is what it seems like to me. Donald Trump imposed 34% tariff on China. China imposed a reciprocal 34% tariff. Donald Trump is angry. He basically issued an ultimatum that China must take back its 34% tariff. China did not respond. Donald Trump then is imposing a 50% extra tariff, a total of 104% tariff. It is a tantrum which basically stated that one entity does something to another. When the other entity retaliates, the entity that initiated the tension is now angry. However, friends, what Donald Trump did and China's retaliation and Donald Trump's re-retaliation, as much as Donald Trump can look good and to Americans, the Trumpers, in the long term, it makes China look stronger. It makes China appears to be the only country that is strong enough or brave enough to take on the United States. Now, friends, please tell me what you think, and I really want to know what you think. But, friends, I am going to end here. I want to thank you for being a member of the Echoing Voice community, my friends, but most especially and most importantly, I want to thank you a lot for watching the Echoing Voice. Peace.